Hello, welcome to the Hormone Genius Podcast. We are here today to talk about a very important thing, and that's loving the body that you are in. And we have a great guest today to talk about loving who you are, and that is Ali Sempek. And Ali, referred to as Coach Ali, is an internationally certified women's wellness coach and founder and CEO of her own women's empowerment company. And ask Coach Ali, after a decade of disordered eating and failing to hate herself skinny, Ali craved more from her life than a smaller jean size. So today, she's changing the narrative on what healthy looks like by helping women transform their relationships with food and who they see in the mirror, which I think is incredible. And I got to meet Ali in person because she is from my side of the world. She comes from Omaha, Lincoln area. And so we were able to meet one time. And I'm just so passionate about this topic because almost every woman, no matter what size you are or whatever, has struggled to love the body that they were given. And we need to, all of us, come to terms with who we are and how to see the goodness and the beauty of our design. And Ali's going to lead us in that journey today and give us some hopefully practical tips that we can all take to kind of lead to that place of loving ourselves. So thanks, Ali, for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I actually recently moved to Dallas, Texas.
Oh
So
my gosh.
I'm no longer in Omaha, but I Omaha will always have my heart.
Awesome. Well, get us started. I know obviously you have your personal story, but right off the bat, I just want to know, where can a woman start
Mm,
with this journey herself? Like, what, I guess if you had to ask like one question, right? If you're meeting a client for the first time and you're looking at her and you're like kind of trying to size her up per se in a sense of who she is, like
mhm,
what is the question that gets to the root of kind
mm,
of where she's at
mhm.
for where how she sees herself?
It's funny, this is actually the first question I ask most of my prospective clients, and it's just when was the time that you noticed your body in a negative way, right? Where did it all start? Because for so many of us, we like to think that we've only been struggling with this for a couple of years or as we're in adulthood, because that's really when we only tangibly are trying to change something. But if you really ask that question and you look back far enough, most women have started to disconnect with their bodies or, dislike the body that they're in as early as elementary school. And it's interesting hearing women share those stories and watch them connect why or maybe where that experience came from.
That is so true. And I know just having a daughter myself, little things she says here and there, I'm like, oh man, you're 11. And I know for even me personally, when I was young, elementary school, I think I was kind of clueless for me personally, but middle school years is when that really starts to pick up where you're sizing yourself up to your peers and all these other things. So yeah, that's a great and very important question because have you found that when you ask that question that most people are able to come to like a point in their life where they're like, this was the moment where I realized, I didn't look like other girls, for instance, or do you find that more, or do you feel like what most people say are more vague? How would you explain that?
It's kind of both. It really does depend on the person. It does tend to start out more vague, and then as we kind of lean into it, they start to pinpoint, right? Because I don't know that there's necessarily a one instance
Yeah.
that this is when everything changed. It's usually more, oh, this one instance was really powerful to my story and really changed the way I saw it. But it was all these like little microaggressions over the course of their lives that continued to like change this narrative, right? It created this lens that they almost look through.
Right.
Um, and I will say that most of the time when I talk to women, what's interesting for me is I ask them, you know, when was the first time you noticed your body in a negative light? Or where did this all start? Tell me your story. And almost every single woman tells me the story of their weight. They tell me numbers. They tell me what size they were at certain ages. They tell me when they gained weight, when they lost weight, how they did that. Um, and one of my favorite things to do is actually ask them, okay, take weight out of the picture. Now what's the story?
That's good, Ali. Really good, because I'm sure we're going to dig into that more, like the whole numbers game. But one thing I wish I would have included in that initial question was also, when do you remember? So like
Mm,
for you personally, obviously you're passionate about this because of a lived experience.
mhm.
So for you, was there a moment, or was like, explain to us how this all kind of came to be, this mission of yours?
Oh gosh. I know we don't have that much time, so I'll make it brief, but um, the first initial memory that I can always tap back to is probably fourth or fifth grade. And I went to a pool party with the girls that I was in Girl Scouts with. And I specifically remember we were all standing on the side of the pool in our cute little swimsuits, right? And I remember thinking, I look different than them. And I noticed I had this line in my stomach. And, funny enough, it's just really how my stomach was built. It wasn't anything wrong with me. But all the other girls had flat stomachs, and I had a line. And I don't know why or where it came from, but I noticed in that moment that I was different and that I felt the need to change. And then over the course of, like you said, middle school was really the big pivotal point where most girls are not taught to like embrace the fact that we're turning into women, right? We're taught to fear it. We're taught to disconnect with it. We're taught to like outsource it. And so same thing with myself of, I was already taller than all of the girls around me. I was already curvier. I was developing a lot faster. Um, and my mom, bless her heart, was just trying to help me understand what was going on with my body. But at the time, all I needed was someone to like love on me and to tell me that it was okay, that that I was perfect exactly as I was. But that's really where I started to learn more of the like food and how to diet and how to change and manipulate my body or try to control it. Um, and so it really just gravitated from there. Like I said, with even my own clients, is it just built over time.
So it makes me think of, when we look at art from 18th century, whatever, probably before that even, and we look at women in art,
Mhm.
and they were always beautiful, number one, but like beautiful in a way that probably is different than what happened in the last 125, 150 years. The curves, the almost like the in a sense the sensuality of a woman's body came from what the way she carried it, everything, and our ability to procreate, and you could see it visibly in women, and we would all look at that art and think of those women as beautiful, but something changed, obviously, and fashion and all this stuff that kind of pushes women to think that there's something else that they need to acquire to become happy, right? Because
Mhm.
that's always it. It's like the life that we want is a happy life, where we're trying to sense who we are, but really gain that happiness. But something changed in who that woman is now. So
Mhm.
if what's your perspective of kind of like, again, what seems to be like not true, like it wasn't supposed to be this way.
Yeah, I love that because I actually, in part of my coaching program, I have them go through the history of body types within women and how they've drastically ebbed and flowed over the course of centuries. Because you're right, when you look back, women were, voluptuous and they like embodied femininity and, like you're saying, our ability to procreate and, create life. That was kind of like the essence of beauty within a woman. Um, and it's interesting if we look at now how much our body types have changed and ebbed and flowed according to what I look at is like the diet industry, like you said, the fashion industry, and then the pharmaceutical industry, right? They are all interconnected because if a woman can achieve one of those body types and feel confident, that's a woman that you don't have control over. And I think for a lot of women, right, we're always saying, well, when I lose weight, I'll be happy. When I make more money, I'll be happy. When I look this way, I'll be happy, right? And so you've got a collective of women who are disconnected and insecure based upon insecurities that they were taught, right? We weren't taught or we weren't born feeling this way about ourselves or wanting to be smaller or to, look the same way as women in magazines. We were taught that along the line. And I think a big thing I try to teach my clients is it's impossible to ever match or adhere to the standards that our society tries to give us because they're always changing, right? You look at, like you said, the art, and then you switch it to, we went through a period of time in the 90s that was like heroin chic. Whoever came up with that name was awful, but I digress. But you were trying to be skin and bones, right? And then you look at more of our today now where, yeah, there's a lot more inclusivity, but you're still looking at it within the lens of the diet industry, within the fashion industry of you can be curvy, but you have to be smooth and your curves can't be too out there. They have to be like Kim Kardashian, right? And it's getting to a point now where women are having to actually like change their bodies with surgery and with more drastic measures to even keep up with what society expectations and standards are.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And I'm even thinking too, like, maybe with the feminist movement in the 60s and like, women's lib and all that whole thing, even, big working to be maybe more athletic looking, although I love athletes. I'm an athlete myself. I mean, I want to stay fit and stuff, but I do remember in college definitely looking at the other girls and being like, ooh, who is more defined? Who is fit? So that would be my words. I'm like, oh, she's very fit. I want to be fit like her. And what does that mean? It means that the muscles, you can see the muscle ridges. You can, again, and I personally, I never will have a six pack ever. No matter what, it's just my body doesn't look that way ever. Even no matter how fit I am. I mean, maybe I do, but main point is I was measuring myself to a body type as an athlete I would never achieve because it doesn't show that way if I'm strong in the abs, for instance, but I would work so hard. So for an athlete, I think it's very difficult because again, especially if you're competing, but then, think about the non-athletes who are again trying to attract their future spouse and they're told they need to look a certain way. And that's so difficult, especially as a young adult. But it does seep into even as we get older. And it's a battle almost for some reason that it seems like we are constantly fighting. It just looks a little different in each season. So, Ali, what kind of advice do you give to women, first off, who are struggling? So we know the first question you ask, at what point did you start having that thought of how you look as a memory? But then what's like some of the second and third steps that you walk through with women?
Yeah. I think it all comes back to exactly what you were just saying. It's a worthiness conversation, right? Because our bodies are our bodies. They're the only body what we will ever have. We can't trade it in and change it for something else. And to a certain point, genetically, we do have a certain body type, right? Us three talking on here don't look the same, and we never will. No matter what I do or don't do, right? We will not look the same. And I love, sometimes you look at like the photos of a lineup of women and they're all the same size or the same weight, and you're like, they don't look the same, right? And so it comes back to like what you're saying is it's this conversation of, well, I want to feel, happy. I want to feel content. I want to look like her, right? Because it comes back to a worthiness conversation or a connection within ourselves. So when I walk women through usually our initial call, but then even our programming or my coaching within them, it depends on the woman how far we have to take it. But when we find that initial moment where they're realizing it all started in elementary school, middle school, maybe it was something that a parent said or a friend made a comment on, right? We start to kind of take pieces out and ask, okay, where did you learn this? Who taught you this? What examples can you give me, right? Within my own story, again, my mom knows I talk about her on every podcast I'm on, and it comes from a place of love. But at that stage of our lives, she was struggling with her own body. She was disconnected and didn't feel confident with who she was. And so she handed those to me, right? It was never a negative comment on what I looked like, but it was maybe more around, are you sure you're hungry? Do you want water instead? Right? Or me hearing her say, oh, I look so old. I look so ugly. And I'm seeing this beautiful woman. My mom is the most gorgeous person inside and out that you will ever meet. And I'm seeing her and going, if she feels this way, then what does that mean about me? Right? And when you're young, you don't know how to differentiate someone else's emotions and feelings from your own, right? And so I take my clients through this process of saying, okay, these feelings, these connections that you have to your body, the limiting beliefs that you've built over time, whose are they? And how do we give them back? Right? And then how do we start to shift what I call them into like empowered confidence of the words that we're saying to ourselves, the thoughts we're thinking, the way we feel, we are in control of that, right? Before we even get into movement and food and all of the actions that people are so obsessed with, right? We live in a very action-based society. We have to do the thoughts and the feelings first. Because if we don't find the root cause of those and start to shift, I don't care how many actions you do, nothing's going to stick.
I feel like lately I've been having this conversation or talking to people about why girls are so mean.
Mm.
And I have I have one teenage girl now. I've gone through two girls. And, I try to like understand there must be some evolutionary reason that girls can be so unkind to each other. And so I want your perspective of this, Ali, but I just don't understand. I think it must have to do with like fighting for the mate. Like there must be something inborn in us that we're like when we're 15 to 18, like when I guess people had babies probably thousands of years back then, that we're trying to shove out the girl next to us in some way so that I'm the primary catch for the mate about to come. That's the only way that it makes sense to me because I just don't understand why girls are mean, you know? So I guess like as all women out there and as we're trying to help our own daughters, again, learn how to love themselves in this world and have confidence, like, but what can we speak to like to this phenomenon of women trying to almost like again push the other girl out by saying unkind things?
And I don't think that that's just high schoolers. I think that that is women in general. I've seen it when I was in the corporate world. Obviously, I'm not anymore, but every time I had a female manager, they would not let me grow. If I asked for more, if I needed more space, if I challenged them a little bit, it was this kind of fear of if another woman steps up, then I'm going to lose my hard-earned place. Right. And I think a lot of times it comes from this fear, this insecurity, this lack of knowing who they are and what their worthiness is. For me, I'm a Christian. And so a lot of my worthiness comes from my upbringing, comes from my faith. Um, but when I look back at high school, because girls are mean, I got bullied all through middle school and high school for really no reason. Um, but when I look back in those experiences, what's funny is I actually have worked with a couple of my bullies, and I've had a couple of them come to me as prospective clients, and they had no idea, no clue that they bullied me or that I felt hurt by the things that they were saying. It's like they almost blacked out those years, right? But the commonality is, again, what their moms taught them, the way they were taught to communicate with other women, the way maybe they felt validated or loved in their own home or in their own like friendships. It comes out as most of the time when people say something negative towards you, it has so much more to do with them than it has anything to do with you. right? And so I look at these younger girls, and it is, I think, partially like what you're saying of, it's this deep-seated need to have the attention, to be the top pick. And I think we all still have that, right? When you're single. But when you can come from a place of like knowing your worth and knowing who you are, and that there's enough space for everyone, it's a lot easier to be nice,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I love that you're talking about worthiness. And, perhaps if growing up, that was what we heard. And I love my parents, and I think they probably mentioned that a lot. But sometimes, the noise of everyone else is so much louder than the people who love us most, right? And so it can be very difficult, and there's this insecurity, and it would almost be better or have been helpful growing up knowing there might be a time where you feel very insecure. And this is a very normal part of childhood and development, but that doesn't define you. So I think that's a very important thing. So for these gals, because we start off the interview saying how when you would ask these women, that often they talk about their weight. They're not talking about other things, right? They're talking about the number on the scale. So with the number on the scale, one of your talking points or the things that you are passionate about, is kind of working through the disordered eating and the body dysmorphia and those sorts of things. So share with us a little bit about how that played a part in your life. And
Mhm.
then share with us maybe some stories of the women you've worked with, just to get us started.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's funny is I did not realize, I don't want to use the term what was wrong with me, but why I felt the way I felt in my body, really until I was in college. I had gone to college and gotten a minor in nutrition and health sciences because I thought if I can just get more information, I can finally fix myself. It was literally the thought process, right? And I had a professor at one point use the term disordered eating, and then they used the term body dysmorphia. And it was like I got hit by a truck of bricks because I had never heard those terms before, and they made complete sense, right? I think most women have gone through some period of their life, if not most of their life, with disordered eating. But since we don't see it as an eating disorder, we don't think it's a problem. And I would argue that, right? If you struggle with your thoughts, your feelings, your obsession around food, right? If we're constantly trying to manipulate it, to again connect back to whether you are a good or a bad person, it tells me you have a problem with food, right? To me, that is an eating disorder. Maybe not in the clinical terms, right? But you have a disconnect. There's something that's not going well there. So for me, it was a control tactic. I was led to believe by society, by the conversations I was around, by um, really the late 90s, right? That if you eat less and you move more and you're skinnier, then you're happy, you're loved, you're accepted, right? That was the constant marketing that I was around. I think back to shows like Biggest Loser or America's Next Top Model. And those were the shows I went home and watched every single day, right? And they all had the same message that if you were in a larger body, that you were not picked, that there was something wrong with you, that you weren't disciplined, you weren't motivated, you were lazy, right? And we see that all across society and in movies and media and the things that we consume, is that if you're in a larger body, that it's your fault, right? And you're not trying hard enough. And so when I started struggling with all this, and it really continued up until my young 20s, it was this control of, if I can just find the perfect answer to food and how much I'm supposed to eat and how much weight I can lose, then I will never have to do it again. And saying that now is like hilarious to me, because if anyone listening to this thinks that once you fix it once, you never have to touch it again, y'all, that's not how it works, right? That's not how as humans we work. And so a lot of times the women that come to me, one of my favorite questions to ask them as we're kind of getting into this is, what do you think weight loss is going to give you? right? I don't care what number it is, but what do you think weight loss is going to give you? And most of the time, it's confidence. It's my husband might look at me, in a different way. I might be able to be more present with my kids. I would feel better in a swimsuit, right? It's a deeper feeling, right? That isn't technically correlated with a number, right? It's correlated with how you feel in your body and how you're taking care of yourself. And so I think a bigger part of that we also work on is saying, how are you respecting your body each day? And what does that look like for you? Because every single person, that's going to be different, right? I have women who started working with me who had such a bad relationship with movement, right? They saw it as only punishment or I'm going to do nothing, right? Those are not women I'm going to say, great, let's start strength training 6 days a week, right? That's not going to be realistic and they're not going to want to do it, right? And when we don't want to do something, chances are we're not going to do it. It's not going to be sustainable, right? And these women, we've really dug into like, why? Why don't you like movement? What about it? What restrictions have you placed on it? Do you think it's just going to the gym? Okay, well, what other forms do you like? When you were a kid, what did you do outside? Right? What brought you joy? Right? Because it's connecting back to, again, that like inner child in us that felt disconnected, didn't feel heard. Right? I also think with body dysmorphia, with again the scale conversation, it's asking women like, why do you have that specific number in your head? Because we all do.
Yeah.
For me, my number was 140. Okay. Y'all, I'm 5'7" and I'm probably like more like 175. I couldn't tell you. I haven't weighed myself in a couple of years, but I usually know where my body sits, right? And for me, for some reason, it was 140. Okay. I know where it came from. Came from the BMI chart, right? I was taught in middle school, this is your height, this is your weight, you're unhealthy. You're in the, overweight category, right? My younger brother had the same instance. He's 5'8" and is all muscle. The kid is rock solid, but he's technically obese on the BMI scale, right? And so we're teaching kids at such a young age that, hey, there's something wrong with you because your body is literally changing and evolving. I look completely different than I did when I was in middle school, right? But now the women I work with, they're in their 30s and their 40s, and they're wondering, why don't I look the same way that I did in high school? I just want to get back to that body. My BMI says I should be that weight. And I think a big conversation that we have, and I've even had to have with myself, is what in your life has changed? And what have you put your body through, or what has your body experienced since then? And if your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs have all been allowed to evolve, why can't your body evolve with you?
I think there's a common misconception too that for women that men prefer women like skinny in a sense. And I know, at least from my experience with my husband, it's so weird because I agree with you. Like I have my number two, and I would say mine is specifically 143. Like, and I'm 5'7" too. It'd be like, that's where I feel like the best, but it's a skinnier me. But my husband doesn't like it. He likes me having like a little bulk in a sense. He doesn't like, and I think it goes back to
Like
that.
something to grab onto. Come on now.
Yeah. Well, and again, but that art from the old days, that was that came from men. I mean, the art, the people who were doing that art was men. So their idea of what was beautiful. So I think we also have to kind of like retrain our brains as women to think that somehow really skinny is attractive to the opposite sex. Because I don't necessarily, I'm not saying like if you are skinny that you're not attractive, because that's not it. It's just that there's so many, again, distorted kind of like cultural myths or kind of things that we have in our brains, and we need to get rid of that, and like you said, like find the worthiness of ourselves. And I don't think what you're saying is we shouldn't try to live a healthy life. That's the other thing that I think when I hear you talk, I'm kind of like, oh well, it's not just about like deciding that if you are overweight, you just have to like live with that and be confident the way you are. If that's not what makes you happy, like maybe there's a place of health for you. And but you're saying it's that it may not be a number that you've thought of, that it's actually just finding the balance and the beauty of who you are in a healthy place, and then finding that inner confidence. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I love to say that I live in like the gray space. Within our culture today, I think we've got one end of the spectrum that is you're trying to look like a fitness influencer, where you have 0% body fat and a big butt and abs, right? You look a certain way. And then you have the other end, which is more like body positivity, where you can be in whatever size body you want and you should just be happy. And I think there's pieces of both that make sense. I love to tell my clients I live in the gray in the middle that says, I want to love the body that I have right now and who I am, but I still want to get better. I still want to be healthier. I want to respect myself more, right? Because you have to have the balance of both. Um, I teach a lot about like intuitive eating because I do think, like you're saying, like a number doesn't tell me if you're healthy or not. Now, yes, if we're talking specifics, yes, on again, both ends of the spectrum, a number can tell us, right? If you're extremely underweight or extremely overweight, those are indicators. But the majority of people, and especially the women that I work with, they all sit in the middle. They're all relatively normal sized humans that are all around a healthy weight, but in their brains, they're not. Right. And so it's bringing them back to rather than trying to constantly diet, because dieting is just wreaking more and more havoc on your body, on your hormones, on the way your body digests food, everything, right? Cortisol levels. It's bringing it back to how am I respecting my body? How am I showing up in a way that's taking care of the body that I have, right? While also working to love who it is right now, right? Because health is not to me a size or like an aesthetic. Health is internal and external, right? It's the actions or the habits that you have on a daily basis that are going to allow you to be 75 and still playing with grandkids, right? I think a lot of times we look at the aesthetics and we say, wow, to Jamie's point, she's so fit. Okay, but fitness doesn't tell me how's her cardiac health, how's her gut health, how's her mental health, right? There's so many other factors to health that are not just physical.
Mm, so true. This is such an important conversation. And Teresa, I'm glad you brought that up because, it's true. And it's a good point for most of what hopefully we share on the podcast in general. Like as we're sharing about all these little, topics and tools and all these things, it's always about like, how does it make you feel? Because every body is so different. So someone comes to you and obviously, like you're saying, there's more than just the number on the scale. So woman comes to you, she's feeling overweight, maybe she's feeling overweight and ashamed or something, let's just say. But let's say she's also feeling very tired and she's having like, skin reactions and she's losing some of her hair, or she has brittle nails and she just can't get out of bed in the morning. That would be a case in which, okay, we want to honor obviously the body you're in, but also start to understand why might she be feeling the way she feels. So how do you navigate those instances where there's definitely symptoms of a need for a health adjustment, let's just say, but then
Absolutely.
also, right, but then also affirming them in how they look still? Where is that line? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's I think to your point, it's looking at the root cause. And unfortunately, as both of you know, we don't live in a world that says, okay, what are your symptoms telling us? Where are they coming from? Right? Let's figure out what's going on internally that's causing these things. We unfortunately live in a world that says, here, take something for that, and we'll hide the symptom, but we won't actually find what's going on. So, I work with a multitude of other practitioners that if there are things that are more symptomatic of something that I'm like, that is outside of my realm of knowledge, I want them to speak with someone, preferably another woman, that says, hey, let's figure out where these are coming from, right? Is it just a nutritional deficiency? Is it that you have dieted for the last 40 years of your life? Well, as we all know, diets are not healthy, right? You're restricting major food groups. You're putting your body through extreme amounts of stress and restriction, right? You're maybe putting it through really in-depth, like punishing movement or workouts. You know, when I've had women come, because I have chatted with clients that have, lost hair, they're struggling with PCOS, endometriosis, different diagnoses that they weren't told why. They were just handed a diagnosis and then said, figure it out. Or, hey, get on this low carb diet and things will be better, right? They weren't actually explained, one, how did I get this, right? Where did it come from? And how can I manage it in a way that like I feel connected to my body again? So where I definitely thrive in the mental emotional piece and I can help with the habit change, right? Because I think when you get that diagnosis or you get into that headspace, you're thinking, I need, for lack of better words, like screw it all. Why even try now? Right? Nothing's working for me. My body's fighting against me, right? It's bringing them back into the space of power and saying, no, we can shift a lot of the habits you have right now, but like the biggest one is like, let's start advocating for yourself, right? Because when you can feel confidence again and say, I'm going to advocate and say like, something's not right here, right? Let's find other answers or find other solutions. And that might be with me, that might be with someone that has more of a nutritional background. Maybe it's a hormone background. Maybe it's, I'm a big fan of chiropractors, right? There are so many different holistic medicine ways to connect back to your body that I don't think we tap into enough.
So, what are, as we wrap up, Ali, because this has been so good, as we start to wrap up, and I know Jamie's going to ask the last question in a minute here, what are 3 practical tips that, you're just speaking to all of our listeners on the Hormone Genius podcast, and you're like, gosh, I mean, I want to give my passion and my heart to you right now. What are 3 things that you want to tell women, practical things that they can do today to love the body they're in?
I love that. Only 3?
You can do as many as you want, girl.
No, 3 is great. I think I always like to touch on that every woman's brain is different. And so the way that we see practical tips is also different. So I think first and foremost, I love to tell my clients, go back to the basics. If you're feeling disconnected in your body, bring it back to the basics. You are a glorified houseplant, right? You need sunlight, you need air, you need water, you need nutrients, right? You maybe need to like go on a walk outside, right? If you're ever feeling disconnected or you just are looking for that first step, go back to those and say, am I doing those really well? Right? Or am I missing those, right? Am I missing, oh, I'm not sleeping, 7 hours every night. I'm kind of disjointed there, right? Going back to the basics and getting really good at those first is going to make your body drastically feel better, right? Another big one, I mean, my favorite thing to make my clients do is hide your scale. Literally hand it to someone, give it to a friend, give it to your husband, throw it away, right? Genuinely give yourself a couple of months without stepping on a scale and continuing to do the positive, actions that you're doing and see how much better your mental health feels about your body, right? We are so tied to a stupid number that doesn't actually tell us anything, right? And then I think that the other big piece is ask for help. I think as women, we have been taught that we are supposed to do everything on our own, that we're supposed to be moms and wives and friends and coworkers, and we're supposed to be doing everything at once and doing it with grace, right? And I think the biggest thing that coaching has taught me, not only through my own coach, but also coaching my clients, is that every single person deserves space and space to be held for them, right? It might not be that your habits are off or that your relationship with food is off. It might be that you need a space for someone to say, it's okay to not be okay. Give me all of your crap and let's work through it together. Right? So those are very short and brief, but I think they kind of touch on different pieces of different women.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I love the glorified houseplant. I love that. That's such a good tip. Like the visual, rest, water, nutrition. Love that. So good. But those are great. Those are great tips, Ali. So then now as we wrap up our episode today, what do you wish every woman knew about her hormone genius?
Mm. No one knows your body better than you know it, right? It's time that we stop outsourcing our intuition and start to connect back to trust, right? Because when we can connect back to trusting our bodies, you can start advocating for what you actually need.
That makes an amazing quote. That's like a really good quote.
Mhm.
Stop outsourcing your intuition. That's such a good little I love that you said that. That's such a and I haven't ever thought of it that way. Like we can trust our body, but sometimes we do, we give the power to other people, right? So good.
I mean, your body literally breathes on its own.
Yeah.
Think of all the function your body does without you having to think about it,
Yeah.
right? Since when did we decide it wasn't intelligent?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
Well, how can people get a hold of you, Ali, work with you? Give us kind of your places that people can connect with you.
Yeah, come hang out with me. All of my social media is Ask Coach Ali. It's Ali. My website is the same, just askcoachali.com. I do free initial consultation calls. So if someone's wondering, is coaching right for me? Is this the step that I need to take? I would love to jump on a call and just get to know you, hear your story, see if we connect and find that next best step for you. But I think my favorite thing is like, if the podcast resonates, I want you to DM me. I want to hang out. I want to hear, what hit home for you. Let's start the conversation.
All right. Thanks so much, Ali, for being with us. And hopefully we'll talk to you again in the future.